Sarah Palin, who's the Republican nominee for vice president, is expected to take questions tonight from a crowd at a town meeting, along with John McCain at her side. She's doing a second media interview, by the way, with Fox. Sean Hannity's got her as the second interview after Charlie Gibson. At the same time, the ethics investigation involving Palin up in Alaska has been gaining attention as Republican lawmakers there, their legislators up in Alaska, are trying to stop it on behalf of Sarah Palin. What does all this mean for the race? Coming up now, joining us right now is David Corn of Mother Jones Magazine and John Fund of OpinionJournal.com. John, of course, is author of Stealing Elections, a wonderful thought right now. Nothing like that to get us all wobbly in our knees. We'd like to get the count right. But let me ask you, David Corn, is there anything to Troopergate? Is it something that would matter to a voter who is really trying to make up his or her mind this November?
Well, you know, initially you might think that it wasn't much. It was much ado about maybe not so much. A small little investigation going on in Alaska about whether she abused her office to basically settle a family score and force the dismissal of her
ex-brother-in-law.
But it's interesting. In the last few days, the Republicans are treating this like it's another Watergate, and they better shut it down right away. They sent this Edward O'Callahan, who used to be a top terrorism prosecutor in the Justice Department, up to Alaska to handle this investigation for Sarah Palin to try to shut it down. Republicans up there have filed, I get all these legal briefs in front of my lap at the moment. They've been filing papers like crazy the last 2 days to try to shoot it down. And at the same time, you know, this was supposed to be done within a couple of weeks, and it was originally a bipartisan investigation. In fact, State Senator Lyda Green, who is a Republican, says that it's a John McCain campaign that is politicizing what was supposed to have been a bipartisan effort, and she is very upset about that.
I'm surprised to hear that. I didn't know it was bipartisan. John Fund, is this a real story or a wild goose chase?
It could be a real story, and I think the investigation should continue. But let's be clear. I was up in Alaska when this story broke. I did some reporting up there. And this story started out as a bipartisan investigation. It changed completely on August 29th. Since then, both parties have completely politicized this investigation. On the one hand, the Republicans, as David pointed out, are trying to slow things down. On the other hand, the Democratic chairman of this committee, Hollis French, has basically automatically said, well, this is a personnel matter that went out of bounds. That's drawing a conclusion before the investigation has been finished. He warns about an October surprise that his investigation might uncover. I think this has become thoroughly politicized. If I were deciding what to do, I would say the Attorney General of Alaska should meet with the Democratic and Republican members of the legislature and say, look, we need an independent counsel to look into this. This is no longer a bipartisan operation in the middle of a presidential campaign. You can't have one. So let's get somebody independent. And let's have them report.
Wouldn't that put the lid on it until after the election, though, John?
And let's have a report by November 4th.
Well, you know what? The Attorney General of Alaska did speak out today, and he's not elected. He's an appointed Attorney General, and he said that he will not let state employees comply with the subpoenas that were voted the other day. Well, now listen, this is there still is a bipartisan element here, John. Last Friday, the committee overseeing the investigation voted 3-2 in favor of the subpoenas, and one of those crucial 3 votes came from a Republican senator who comes from the town of Wasilla, Sarah Palin's own hometown. Her representative voted in favor of going ahead with these subpoenas.
David, one of the things we know about Sarah Palin is she went up against the Republican machine, the corrupt Republican machine of Ted Stevens and Don Young. There are a lot of Republicans who have 2 words for Sarah Palin in Alaska, and they're not happy birthday.
Okay, let me ask you about the politics of Sarah Palin nationally. John Fund, you know how PR works, you know how journalism works. Is she getting the kind of entree to the press that most VP nominees get, or is she being cosseted, or what the right word is? Experience. You know what President Bush calls it, the prejudice of declining lower expectations, or whatever he calls it. Is she being kept from talking to the press because they don't trust the situation? Is that what's going on here?
Chris, this reminds me an awful lot of the way Geraldine Ferraro was treated in 1984. She was someone who was also a complete surprise in the national scene. She had relatively limited experience in national politics. And believe me, as soon as questions about her husband and his ties to various unsavory characters were raised, they drew her back, and they had one brief press conference with her several weeks into her selection, and otherwise they didn't ask a lot of questions.
Let me just defend Geraldine. She stood out on a stage one weekend afternoon after the questions came up about her tax returns and her husband's relations in terms of the income they were filing, the May 15th report. And she stood there for like an hour on the stage answering every single question. She even called her accountant. His name was Murray. I'll never forget it. She said, Murray, come out here. They answered every question. Just about David Corn. I think Geraldine Farrar, whatever her problems were, she did confront the lions. She faced the lions.
Chris, I agree, and that happened well after her selection, and maybe Sarah Palin will ultimately have to do this. The point is, once she did that, she also disappeared from the campaign trail for a while.
Your thoughts, John Corn. Your turn. I mean, David Corn.
It's not just Sarah Palin. I think it's been 35 days now since John McCain has had a press conference. I mean, neither one of these people are really putting themselves out there to be questioned. I mean, going on with Sean Hannity, I mean, that's really not going to be a serious interview. She won't be asked the hard questions. And I think the McCain camp would like to run out the clock as long as possible for both McCain and Sarah Palin, so they don't have to talk about some of the issues that you've been talking about earlier on the show.
Let's just be clear. All of these candidates are trying to keep things from reporters and from the public. I spent an awful lot of time trying to get the most important records out of the Resco land deal from the Obama campaign. Yeah. They not only refuse to give them, but they won't even give a reason why they won't give them. McCain is doing the same thing. Palin is doing the same thing. And believe me, Obama has released 1 page of medical records versus John McCain's thousands of pages. So everybody is playing hide the ball.
I have a lot of faith in Gwen Ifill moderating that debate with the two vice presidential candidates. I think it's going to be an hour and a half. We're going to learn a lot. But that's October 2nd. It's a long time to wait.